Okay, here we're going to explore a little bit about outdoor cannabis production. We see a prime image of that here. This cannabis is being grown outdoors. It can also be considered in raised beds where they're each in their own separate container, and they're on pallets to help drainage. So with outdoor production, there's some similarities, but there can also be some variability in exactly how a grower chooses to go about this. So first off, in general, outdoor production offers the least overall cost to actually produce the crop. It's a very efficient method of production because there's no need for lights or electricity. You can utilize natural soil, and that may only require amendments instead of basically starting from scratch, as some indoor grow operations have to go through and do. Factors to consider when growing outdoors: there's climate, there's soil, there's pests, and there's neighbors or what we call promiscuous pollen that may be in the area there. So looking first at climate. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Hardiness Zone Map is a great place to start looking at your particular region. You have to realize there might be microclimates. This only gives you a general idea of what to expect. You can also see near coastal areas or large bodies of water, there can be moderation in those temperatures compared to those that might be far away or at higher elevation. And this is why if you follow this degree of latitude, it may not always match up. So if you're kind of looking here, you can see there's a lot of variability, with the west coast being much warmer than that same degree of latitude. Here in kind of the middle part of the country, and here in the Rocky Mountains, also a great degree of variability. Now, cannabis is not frost tolerant. As a result, frost is 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius and lower, and that will kill a cannabis plant. It's important to keep these frost concerns in mind early and late in the season for growing outdoors. Walls of water, this is what they look like. They can be used early in the season to protect young seedlings. It is very labor intensive, but it doesn't require any heat to be added. These water tubes basically heat up with the sun's energy and can give back some of that heat during the day. There's a time investment and can be unpractical on very large operations. Remade style covers are best suited for long rows and acts as kind of like a blanket to help protect tender vegetation. Remember, only a heated greenhouse can help protect the crop if temperatures drop below 30 degrees. Otherwise, they'll get up in the morning and they'll look kind of melted or black or damaged. So you don't want to kind of rely on these structures to get them through and start them too early. These would be great if you kind of have that one kind of oddly cold night in the early part or late part in the growing season. Now, soil, there's many different soil types to consider: clay, sand, loam, and many distinctions between those. Soil testing is highly advised and recommended for both nutrients and texture, which can tell you a lot about a growing site, especially if it's a rented or new field to you. Should also give you an idea if it's worth pursuing a location, if estimated costs would be too high to amend it. We can make anything we kind of need to, but in order to get this soil to kind of produce this, it might be cost prohibitive. Now, to prepare the soil, the ideal time is in the fall to allow time for pH adjustments in particular if it's necessary, and give time for the breakdown of amendments that may be added so they can become plant available in the spring. Soil can be adjusted in the spring, but large changes need to equilibrate over time, which can limit potential damage to the crop. So the earlier you can plan something, the earlier you can have that soil test done, the earlier you can adjust that pH, the better your plant will be the following season. Organic matter is carbon-based components of soil. You see here being turned. Here's chicken. We have like manure and straw would be examples here. This often gets a lot of attention. It can be raised to very high levels with excessive compost additions. More is not better necessarily with organic matter. It's important for water holding capacity, but too much water holding capacity and nutrients can cause more harm than good. People have been known to burn their plants with excessive additions of organic matter. Also, it can hold too much water in that area, or roots can become waterlogged. For large field application, there's something called a hard pan. What this is soil compacted below the surface. So if you just kind of scratch the surface, it might be great, but there could be this hard pan layer located below that area. This can be an issue where heavy equipment's being used. It can occur if soil is being worked when it was too wet, or an area has been plowed excessively. You could have that issue there of that hard pan or that plow pan layer. What this is it creates a layer that doesn't allow natural percolation of water and can negatively impact root development. So this is something to be mindful of. If you're looking at a potential site, you can dig a hole, use penetrometers or ways to kind of assess the degree or presence of a hard pan. Now, raised bed growing, again, this is still outdoor production. Raised bed is an example of this. The advantage is they warm up really quickly, the plant is at a height that's easier to work with, and you can control what goes in the actual box as far as amendments or soil or adding vermiculite or perlite or something else, a special mix that you want to add. However, the negative effects with a raised bed are that the soil can often get too warm in the summer. As you can see here, shade netting has been used. It can increase irrigation frequency, the time and resources it takes to construct them, and they're kind of fixed in place once established. They're not very easy to move. So if you have a well-established area, by all means, growing beds or raised beds might be a quality option for you, but you do got to consider the pros and cons. Now, growing in a field or outdoor in general, typically weeds are a concern, and there's many options for weed suppression. You can use plastic, which is the easiest, often the cheapest, but the end of the season disposal can be a challenge or issue. There's biodegradable plastic mulches, and that can reduce waste at the end of the season, with variable results with more field trash than may be wanted, meaning there could be particulate left at the end of the season. There's natural, which can be wood-based, can be expensive, can also harbor pests from year to year. Landscape fabric, as we see here, can be very expensive initially, but can last for many seasons, so it might be a good option once you can afford or justify the initial investment. Outdoor growing, just like other sites, you need to consider fertilizers and irrigation. Typically, drip irrigation is the only feasible method for long distances. Incorporating an injector such as a dosatron or dosmatic here is recommended, so you can also fertilize the crop over a large area efficiently. Wind protection. Strong winds can break plants, can also increase daily water requirements. The goal is not to stop the wind entirely, but to kind of break it up. Privacy fence or shade netting is a good option to help kind of break up some of that wind, which is better than a solid plastic or vinyl fence. This kind of creates areas where a lot of pressure can occur, or you can get swirling winds that can also damage plants. Staking and trellising and supporting plants can help reduce the potential for wind damage. You want to watch out for wild animals. You are growing outside. They can seem like every animal, including some humans, may want to investigate or harm your crop. Consider fencing operations that either have a physical metal fence, as this does here, or electrified for potential animals. Metal is a permanent fixture, but some animals can climb over or dig under it. The downfall to an electrical fence, it needs to be kept clear of weeds, and so that power can be kept to it for the entire season. Insects of concern. You want to keep a careful eye out for insects that may feed on your plants. Some can also transmit diseases. You want to monitor plants and catch pests early. Some can be very small, as we see with thrips and whiteflies and aphids, so you want to be really inspecting your plants well. Lastly, promiscuous pollen. You want to know thy neighbor. You want to know if someone else is growing plants that are growing for breeding purposes. There could be pollen in the area. Your goal is not to pollinate cannabis plants because you want your female plants to produce cannabinoids and not seeds. And the weather and prevailing winds may carry pollen a few feet to even many, many miles. You may want to consider early or late planting dates for prevent unintentional pollination. High amounts of moisture in the air can reduce pollen's ability to reach or pollinate a female flower. This is where potential misting or irrigation systems, overhead irrigation systems, may come into play to help reduce the chance that your outdoor growing field gets mispollinated by a local area that may be breeding. This is also important if you have a high tunnel that you're growing male plants for breeding purposes. You don't want to have that pollen go out into the field because it will mess up the efficiency and production of your entire field crop.